Good morning or afternoon or whenever you're watching this. I just want to say thank you for continuing to join us as we do these virtual chapels for the summer of 2020. My name is Taylor. I am the youth director at Grace Bible Fellowship in Jenison, Michigan. I am a graduate of Grace Christian University. I graduated back in 2017. And I'm happy to be here with you today to provide a short encouragement and challenge from the Word of God. I was given John chapter 8 for the passage that I was asked to speak out of. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the story. It's this beautiful picture of Jesus' wisdom and mercy and grace as he deals with the Pharisees and the scribes and also a woman caught in adultery. So let's just jump right in. John chapter 8, starting in verse 2. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" They said this to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. So right off the bat, there's a few red flags in this story. So first of all, under Jewish law, in order to accuse someone of adultery, you had to have two eyewitnesses who witnessed the very act of adultery happening. This couldn't have been something that they heard through the grapevine. It couldn't have been the hot gossip of the day. It couldn't have even been an outright confession from the woman. Two people had to witness the very act of adultery happening. So how did the Pharisees encounter this woman? Was she brought to them? Were they spying on her? Did they set the whole thing up? We don't really know, but something's a little fishy right off the bat. And then the even bigger red flag here is where is the man in this situation? Adultery is not an act that you can commit on your own. So why did they only drag the woman to Jesus? Did the man just slip on his robe and join the crowd? Was he part of a setup? We don't really know, but it is a little weird. And I think what it exposes here is another theme that we see throughout Jesus' encounters with the Pharisees in Scripture, and that is that they're hypocritical, that they have this immense amount of pride, and that they are hiding behind this thin veil of legalism and of pursuing justice, when in reality all they care about is backing Jesus into a corner. They don't care about this woman. They don't care about justice under the law. They don't even care about her husband or her marriage. She is just a weapon to them to use against Jesus, which shows where their heart is really at. So how does Jesus respond to this? I actually really like in the second half of verse 6, Jesus, it says that he knelt down and started drawing in the dirt, which is a really strange response if you think about it. Can you imagine if you brought this huge bombshell of a story to someone and they just reacted by just ignoring you, crouching on the ground and playing in the dirt? It's this really interesting response, and I think it shows that Jesus immediately saw through this thin cover of justice that they were hiding behind, and he saw what their intent was. He's also he's exposing this common sin in us by what he says in verse 7. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. So after they pressed Jesus, he took his time with how he wanted to respond to this, and he comes back with this great statement that kind of slaps him in the face. Let him who's without sin throw the first stone. Like I said, he's exposing a common sin in them, and that is this human desire to punish the sins of others, to pursue what we feel is justice, which can sometimes feel punitive, but it's this desire to see others punished for what they do without having any sense of our own sin. So the Pharisees here, their goal is to trick Jesus, but they're also bringing this woman to be punished for her sins without even doing the work of looking inside and seeing all the ways that they're falling short in this situation. So Jesus calls that out. He sees it, and he calls it out. So how do the Pharisees respond? It says that they must have been convicted because they started to leave. starting with the oldest all the way down to the youngest. And after everyone leaves, we are in this situation as the readers where we kind of get to be a fly on the wall, where once Jesus refused to kind of play this public condemn or condone game with this woman and with her sin, we get to see the answer to this test that he was put in. We get to see how he's going to react to this woman who, under Jewish law, did commit a capital offense and is guilty and deserves to be put to death. Jesus alone was the one who could condemn her under the circumstances that he laid out. He was the only one in the crowd who was without sin, so he was the only one who held the right to throw the first stone. But he doesn't. He chooses not to. It says that Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And calling him by Lord shows that she had faith in him as the Christ. And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." Which is another really powerful, really popular verse out of this passage. Go on and sin no more. I feel like when I've read this passage, I guess as a kid, that can read it as like almost a warning. It's Jesus telling her like, all right, I'm bailing you out this one time, but don't do it again or else you're gonna get stoned. But it's not that. He's not warning this woman that she can never sin again. He's inviting her to live this new life. He's setting up this brand new life for her that's not built on the foundation of legalism and law like what the Pharisees were building, but it's built on grace and grace alone. So he's rebuilding this idea of righteousness on the basis of grace instead of on the basis of legalism and of the law and of this sacrificial system. He's hinting at his death on the cross. The reason that he doesn't have to kill this woman for her offense is that he knows that he will take her place in a few short weeks on the cross. He knows that he will pay the price and has paid the price for her sin already. So what do we do with this passage in 2020? How do we apply this to our lives? I think one of the first things that I was convicted of as I kind of read and prepared for this is that in 2020, and I guess just in our modern times, we live in really divided times, and that feels really amplified right now. There's this insane rhetoric of us versus them in everything we do, and we see good Christian people who are having differences of opinions tearing each other apart, whether that's wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, whether that's the pandemic is real or it's a hoax, whether that's social justice issues, whether that's political issues. We're all probably too quick to pick up stones and to hold them in our hands and to store them away in our pockets and wait for the next moment of outrage. We just have these closed fists around these stones. We have such an intense desire to see others punished for their sins that we don't spend the time looking into our own lives. And I know I'm guilty of this just as much as anyone. So I guess a good challenge for us is to do the hard work of looking inside yourself. Find areas where you're either directly holding stones ready to throw them or maybe putting them in your back pocket and saving them for the next thing that outrages you and that makes you feel wrong. What we need to do is keep our hands free so that we can continue to come alongside broken people, and instead of coming at them with stones, we can come at them with empty hands and we can point them to the one who saves, to the one who has this immense grace, to the one who can invite them to live transformed lives, not because they've been accused or because the law has been thrown at them, but because they've had this grace experience that can serve to transform and to change them. And this story is tough for me because it just kind of ends there. You don't get to see anything that happens to this woman. It doesn't say she stood up and she cried and she hugged Jesus and she had this big moment. She could have gotten up and run away. She could have been terrified. We don't really know. But what I hope happened is the same thing that happened for me and that happened for, I'm sure, most of us that call ourselves Christians, and that is that she had this moment, this encounter, this experience with the grace of Jesus that doesn't make sense under the human view of justice. She had this experience where she was forgiven completely for something she deserved to be put to death too. There aren't levels of lostness here. Just because I've never cheated on my wife doesn't mean that I can't identify with this woman. We all deserve death. We all deserve capital offense. But Jesus took our place on the cross. And he shows that to this woman here. He says, neither do I condemn you. Jesus is not an accuser. He's an advocate for adulterers and for murderers and for dirty, gross sinners like you and me and this adulterous woman. And that can empower us to change our lives in a way that the law never could. This woman would have known the law. She would have known that it was against the law to sleep with another man who wasn't her husband. But obviously she didn't keep that. But Jesus here, hopefully when he says go from now on and sin no more, he's inviting her to live this transformed life free from her vices and from her addictions and from her sins. So for me, I hope that that's what this woman did. I hope that she went away transformed, that she found community outside of her adulterous community, that she found just a place where she could walk in grace and that she was free from these sins. Maybe she went and talked to her husband. Maybe she restored her marriage. Maybe she didn't. But I know that each of us have a choice of how we respond to the call to not be condemned and to go and sin no more. So I encourage you, put down your rocks, go find community that helps you remember this grace and helps you to live a transformed lives. As we continue to go through the hard times of 2020, we can look to Jesus Christ and know that there is no condemnation in those who have been freed by him. Thanks for joining us. I hope you have a great week.